Hey guys, so I just want to be real with you for just a second. I have been feeling my imposter syndrome so strongly lately. I haven't been keeping up to date with horror announcements and I haven't been watching a lot of horror. And sometimes I just feel like, because this is my job, this like pressure to do all of these things, but at the end of the day, I still want this to be fun for me. So I do give myself some breaks here and there, but it does make me feel like an imposter on the channel, when I come on here to talk about horror movies all the time. I compare myself to other creators, feeling like I don't watch enough horror movies, like I can't watch some horror movies, because of my boundaries. And I just thought I'd really lean into that today and, underscore what I preach all the time on this channel is that you can, of course, be a horror fan while still respecting your own boundaries. And I think that really applies to today's video, given that they're all PG-13 recommendations. These are just movies that make me feel comfy and like welcome in the horror genre, because these are just my type of movies. I love PG-13 horror movies and I don't think there's any shame in that. They're just not too heavy in content. So I wanted to talk about them again even more because I did do a whole video, I think over 2 years ago now, on top 10, or no, I think it was more than 10, but my favorite PG-13 horror movies. So I will link that video up here in case you want even more recommendations. And those technically are probably in my top, whatever number it was that I did in that video. Those are my favorites of all time, probably. Well, some of them are questionable now, but because it's over 2 years ago. But there's so many that I love, so I obviously wanted to come back and do a part 2. So here we are. Personally, PG-13 horror movies just offer my type of horror that I really love. They don't rely on gratuitous gore or nudity or violence or anything like that. And supernatural movies just tend to be more effective for me, and those typically are PG-13. But before we get into the top 10 PG-13 horror movies, I just want to thank NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. A VPN is a great way to increase your security and privacy online. It protects your IP address, hides your virtual location, and shields your data from snoopers and protects you from possible cyber attacks. Plus, NordVPN works on up to 6 devices, so you're always protected. So not only does using a VPN make it super secure to use the internet, another feature that I absolutely love that I tell you about all the time is, of course, you can access other countries' streaming service selections. Some of the movies in today's video that I'm going to talk about, such as Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, are only available in some countries, but if you have NordVPN, you can connect to the US, refresh your Netflix, and have access to tons more streaming, such as the movies in today's video. Likewise, Escape Room is not actually available to stream anywhere in the US. However, if you connect to Australia through NordVPN, it's on their Netflix. Also, NordVPN has a brand new feature called Threat Protection, and when enabled without even being connected to a VPN server, it automatically safeguards you against malware and blocks trackers and intrusive ads. So make sure you go to nordvpn.com/possessedbyhorror to get a 2-year plan with an exclusive deal, plus 1 month for free, and it's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk at all to try it for yourself today. So since I already mentioned it during the sponsor, let's talk about the first movie on this list, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This follows a group of friends on Halloween night who enter an abandoned house and discover the stories of Sarah Bellows. However, when they return home, they soon realize stories are being written in real time about them. I love when you Google this one. The top question is, can 12-year-olds watch this movie? With the answer of, kids of all ages will be fine. I love that. I agree, because this is based on a children's trilogy kind of horror book series, obviously, a short story collection. And although it is a horror movie, I think it is like lesser scary than other movies on this list just because of the tone of the movie, because it does follow children, or teens rather, so it makes it more of a lighthearted movie, and the story isn't like very heavy. However, some of the visuals are so effective for me personally. I mean, Javier Botet is cast in this as Big Toe Corpse, and anything that he is in, I am terrified of. He's in Mama, he's in so many things. Anything that he's in, he is absolutely incredible of an actor, especially the kind of acting that he does. It is just so effective for me. Next, we have Gretel and Hansel, and this is one that I have talked about in the past. podcast, but it's been a minute, so we're gonna bring it back. This is one of my favorite movies of all time, actually, and probably the most beautiful movie I have ever seen, ever. Hands down, this is the most visually stunning and my favorite visuals of any movie besides maybe Interstellar. So this follows Gretel and Hansel as they traverse through the woods looking for food and shelter and stumble upon a house that seems too good to be true. This is, of course, a classic tale retold, and I really love the modern updates to this one, and for me, it doesn't really push the scare factor. This one is just a little bit more eerie. The horror elements are very mild and minor, and it's more about the setting and the atmosphere and building all of that up versus actual like true horror elements that we think of when we think of horror movies. It's just visually stunning, great atmosphere. That's what you're getting out of Gretel and Hansel. And I really wish more people talked about this one because it is so underrated. Like, no one really talks about this movie, but it is just one of my favorites of all time. And it's classic Oz Perkins. So if you're a fan of his other movies like Black Coat's Daughter or I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, it is just like those with the beautiful atmosphere. Maybe the story is a little bit slower. This one is probably more fast-paced than the other two. The other two are very much slow burns, but Gretel and Hansel is definitely more fast-paced. But if you haven't seen it yet and you like his other work, then definitely watch this one. Next we have Old. You knew I had to. Anytime I can include it, I'm going to. Obviously not for everyone, but you know by now how much I love this movie. And it was finally added to HBOMAX, so you can go watch it now if you have yet to see it because it hasn't been out on streaming. So no excuse now, go watch it. This follows a vacationing family that get a chance to experience an isolated beach with a few others from the exclusive resort, but soon realize something is not right about this place as they begin aging rapidly. I love the M. Night twist on this. I absolutely love the explanation. I think this is one of his best movies, and I know that's so controversial. I still prefer Sixth Sense. I think that is hands down his best movie ever made, but I love Old. I love the concept. I love how it was executed and the twist in the end. It is just so effective for me. I just don't think anyone can shock quite like an M. Night twist, and I think this one in particular is so good. Maybe a little bit predictable, and of course M. Night is not perfect of a filmmaker. I think he definitely has a lot of flaws when it comes to his filmmaking, but his storytelling is just so up my alley, and I am so excited for his new movie, Knock at the Cabin Door, which I've heard is supposed to be an adaptation of The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. We'll see, because that book is amazing. And I think Old is one of his more like lighthearted concepts comparatively. If you look at other movies like Sixth Sense, which is a lot heavier, even Signs and The Village and things like that, I think Old is much more lighthearted, and I think it is the perfect like casual watch to throw on during the day because it is a daytime movie. In the summer, it just fits those vibes, and I love it. I still think it gets pretty dark and emotional. So don't knock it till you try it. You know, it does have very disturbing visuals at times. The cave scene, you know what I'm talking about? So if you've had your doubts, go watch it and let me know because I'm obsessed with this movie. Next up, we have A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2, both rated PG-13. I think the first one left me a little bit underwhelmed when I first saw it, but since it has grown on me more and more, and I absolutely love the sequel. In fact, I think I like the sequel even more than the first one. It's just much more action-packed, especially for a PG-13 movie. You're getting a lot of tension, a lot of horror elements. This movie, of course, follows a family as they navigate post-apocalypse after an invasion of a species of noise-sensitive creatures. This is probably the most intense, or should I say tense, suspenseful, jump scare heavy of all of these movies. So if that's something that you're looking for, obviously A Quiet Place is a good go-to. It's literally almost torture sometimes, the suspense in these movies and the tension, and oh my god, especially in the second one, it was like painful to watch because you're just so uncomfortable and it's just so tense, like unlike any other on this list, but also in the best way. And I will say that these movies have some of my favorite jump scares of any horror movie. I just find them to be so effective. Yes, there are a couple in there, maybe one in each movie that are not great, but generally most of them have really great follow through and just really, really good jump scares. We will see what they do with the prequel and the spin-off. I've heard the prequel, or I think the first day is the prequel, spin-off is something else. That will be, or day one or whatever they're calling it, that'll follow a different family. I kind of have lower expectations, but I will keep an open mind about it. So we'll see. Next up is a movie that I don't think I've ever talked about. Have I talked about this one before? I don't think so. And I have gotten a lot of comments about it, so today we're finally talking about it. The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I watched this movie first in high school, and it was so effective for me that I had to go for a walk after I saw it. It was just a lot. It was a lot for me in high school for some reason. Well, not for some reason. I know why. It is very effective in the horror elements that they use in this. It is honestly probably one of the most scary on this list if you want genuine like fear. And usually possession movies don't really bother me like that, but for some reason this is the one that has really affected me and like stuck with me out of all the possession movies I've seen. So this is more of a legal horror movie that follows Father Moore, who is arrested after performing an exorcism that leads to Emily Rose's death. The prosecutor believes she actually suffered from schizophrenia, and no one wants to believe that she could have actually been possessed. Now the visuals are very disturbing, but I do find it to be a little bit more on the legal drama side. So although horror-wise it was very effective, it is more of a slower burn compared to other possession movies. It feels a little bit more like a thriller because of that, but the visuals in this were just so effective. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the concept of mental illness versus possession and the visuals of it all. I'm not sure, but for some reason this was just so good. Next up, you knew was going to be on this list because I include it in every video that I can. Underwater. I've talked about it so many times in this channel, so I'm sorry. Did you know it was actually PG-13? Of course you did, because why wouldn't it be? There's really nothing going on that would be needing an R rating. There is some gore in it, but it's not heavy gore by any means, and the concept isn't super heavy or, you know, disturbing or anything like that. This, of course, follows a crew sent down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench 7 miles below the surface of the ocean, only to find themselves trapped walking along the seafloor while something is hunting them. I find a lot of supernatural and creature feature movies tend to be really effective with keeping a PG-13 rating because creature features, although most of the time offer some gore, most of them offer gore, this one is really effective in having a little bit of gore, but obviously it doesn't rely too much on that because it is still PG-13. And typically creature features aren't really my favorites. Like I think this is probably my favorite creature movie of all time, but they're not ones I really gravitate towards. But the concept for this one alone with the reveal at the end is just perfection. I think it's really the ending that makes this movie one of my favorites, especially when it comes to like water movies and things like that. So just go watch it if you haven't yet. Next up, we have Ouija, Origin of Evil. This, of course, is a sequel that is actually a prequel to Ouija, and this one, Origin of Evil, is done by Mike Flanagan, and I think a lot of people forget about that, or this is probably his most underrated movie or show that he's ever done before, because not a lot of people really talk about this one when it comes to Mike Flanagan. So this is set in 1967 Los Angeles and follows a mother and two daughters who scam people into thinking they can communicate with the other side, when one day they accidentally summon a merciless spirit. The original is absolutely terrible. I don't really love it, but for some reason this one is so effective and probably one of the best like sequel prequels. It's a prequel, but you know, it came after the first one and is so good. I love how the original has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 6% and Origin of Evil has 83%. Like that just goes to show how much Mike Flanagan really added to this is it a franchise? I don't know. To this series, to this duo. So if you've ever written this one off because you thought the original was bad, please give this one a try because it's not really related to the original. It's a prequel, so it happens before the events of the original. So definitely watch this one. Next up, we have one of my favorite comfort movies in the world, and that is Escape Room. This one is just such an easy watch for me. There's nothing heavy going on. Well, sometimes it's not like too heavy or anything. However, still very suspenseful. I think this one is up there with A Quiet Place as far as like the tension and the suspense that you're feeling and kind of that anxiety of picturing yourself in their shoes. This follows a group of people selected to take part in a very exclusive escape room challenge with the promise of money if they actually escape. It soon turns into their own personal living nightmares as they navigate the rooms, now fighting for their lives. So the sequel was, if you've been around, you know how I feel about the sequel. It was so terrible to me and honestly does such a disservice to the original that it makes me like the original less because of the reveals and just the the changes that they made to the story that make no sense at all. I absolutely hate it. I don't like the sequel at all, but the original is just so good, and I still have yet to track down the like director's cut version of the sequel where the ending is completely different. I'm just trying not to like buy the movie in order to watch that, so let me know if there's a way I can do that. But I just love the original so much, and I just like to pretend that the sequel just doesn't exist. All right, next up we have The Uninvited. It's been a while since I talked about this one. I think I've only talked about it once or twice on the channel anyway. To me, this is an underrated movie and is of course the American remake of the Korean original, The Tale of Two Sisters, which is also incredible, arguably better, but we're not here to talk about the original. We're here to talk about PG-13 movies, which The Uninvited falls into. So after Anna is released from psychiatric care, she realizes just how much has changed at home with her mother's nurse, who is now engaged to her father, and her mother's ghost screaming for revenge. Anna and her sister must investigate to find out the truth. I don't want to say too much about this one. It's not perfect by any means. There is, you know, some cheesiness going on in here. It does feel like the era it came out in 2009. It kind of has that like mid-2000s vibe going for it, I think. But it's really, really well done. I really enjoy this movie. In fact, I'm just about to purchase it on DVD because I don't own it already, which is so shocking to me. But this is just, again, another like casual viewing with a really twisty ride, so just get ready for that. Okay, so the last PG-13 horror movie we're going to talk about in today's video is The Possession. This movie is so criminally underrated. I think it's written off as being like really cheesy because if you watch the trailer, it kind of has those similar, the essence of like the Bye Bye Man or Wish Upon or one of those really cheesy mid-2000s, like 2010s type horror movie that is just so bad. Sometimes in a fun way. I think the Bye Bye Man is one of those where it's like a little bit fun to watch. I don't know. But this one really surprised me with how much I liked it. After watching it, I was fully expecting like a really cheesy Bye Bye Man thing. I don't remember which came first, but it had that kind of similar vibe to it in the trailer. So I was a little bit nervous that it would be pretty cheesy and bad, but it's really unique and very original, especially for a possession movie. I think this one does possession so differently from any of the others. So I think you'd be surprised at how much you like it. So this follows a couple and their daughter who become fixated on a mysterious box at a yard sale, and seeing no real risk, they decide to buy it for their daughter. However, she begins to become more and more unstable as they soon realize what actually might be contained in the box. Now, there's lots of producers on it, but Sam Raimi is one of those producers. I'm not the biggest fan of Sam Raimi movies, not gonna lie. Speaking of, I know a lot of you want me to watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Is that what it's called? I'm waiting for streaming on that one because I didn't feel like going to theater to watch it. But I know there's horror elements, so I will talk about it one day when it's out on streaming, and I'll do a Letterboxd recap about it. This has some of my favorite types of horror in it. There's some like teeth stuff going on. I just really like the horror elements in this movie. And again, I find it to be very original for the type of movie that it is. When you're expecting like this cheesy possession movie and it turns out to be something different, and I really like it. And the final act is really good and very satisfying. And again, I think this is another supernatural movie that can really push the envelope when it comes to horror without being super over the top or gratuitous about it. And I really like the balance in this movie. I will say it does lean a little bit on the cheesier end of the spectrum, so not everyone's going to enjoy this movie as much as I did, but it was so surprising because I think I had such low expectations going into this movie, but still an underrated movie in my opinion. So there you have 10 more PG-13 horror movies that I absolutely love. Let me know if you want a part 3. I could probably do like 5 parts to this because PG-13 horror movies are just so my jam, and I absolutely love them because they are just the easiest watches to me. And not that I don't seek out other ones. Obviously, I love a lot of R-rated movies. So I just gravitate so much towards these types of movies that are more supernatural and don't rely on the heavy violence and gore. I'd love to hear your favorite PG-13 horror movies that were the most effective for you, and make sure you go check out my last video to see some other recommendations if you need some more. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.